Hi guys, welcome to Three Daughters Brewing. We're going to be canning some beer today. My name is Captain Steve, and I'm going to be showing you the ins and outs of what you need to do to get set up, run through the canning line, and how to break it down. The basic process we're going to be looking at today is, one, getting the station set up, getting everything on and all the equipment you need around. You're going to need to sanitize the equipment, how to do that process correctly with the correct chemicals. Then we're going to look at starting the machine, how to get the correct amount of fill in each can, how to keep your dissolved oxygen down, make sure there's not too much foam or too little, and how to keep up with that while the can run goes, because it does tend to change, the fills tend to change throughout the canning run. And then we're going to look at breakdown and cleanup and how to properly take care of your canning machine with preventative maintenance. Here at Three Daughters, we use our lab to monitor the quality of our cans. We use them to both test the seams to make sure we're getting a good solid seal on the top of the can. We measure the DO, which is the dissolved oxygen, to make sure our shelf life is going to be sufficient. And we also have them test the color and SRM as the cans age, so we really get a good tell of what our cans are doing out in the market. We keep some cold, and we keep some room temperature to see how the two different held cans change over time. Here at Three Daughters, we have a 4-head filler. It's very similar to what other craft breweries have around the nation. Once you start getting into bigger projects, you get into rotational fillers, which are a little different. But as far as a craft brewing certificate, this should be pretty much square you away on what you need to know to operate a canning machine, as well as the principles are all the same, just like with any packaging of bottling or kegging. If you know what you're looking for and what you want to do, it's just a different machine to operate. All right, so right now we're going to start with our cleanup, our sanitation of the canning machine, as well as ensuring we have everything set up for an entire can run, so that we don't ever have to stop the machine. Anytime you stop the machine, you get foaming issues and underfills, overfills. So you want to have everything ready to go before you start filling your first can of beer. So we've got our work grant here filled with sanitizer, and we're going to run that over to the canning machine, run it through our keg fillers, run it through all orifices of the canning machine, ensure everything's sanitized. We'll go ahead and get that started. Fire it up, Steve. We're going to come right down here. We see that our keg fillers are having the sanitizer cycle through them. We're getting it coming out of the fill heads into some cans here. So we see we have the fill heads down in the sanitizer to make sure that they're getting sanitized all the way up. If you just have it pouring out, you're only sanitizing the inside, and you're leaving possible infection that could go into your beer. This is just one step of getting ready. You want to make sure you have everything else required to can. While we can, we also fill kegs, so we have the appropriate amount of kegs, the types of kegs, right here on hand. We've got the correct amount of cans in the depalletizer. We've got extra cans if we're going to do more than one pallet. We've got our labeler on with the right date, right batch number. My packer over there, he's got his 12, 24-pack boxes. He's got his 6-pack lids he's going to need for the run. He's got extra pallets to set up on. The guy that's going to be running this side, he's got his can ends right here ready to go. And you just want to make sure anything that you could possibly need for the run, you want to have it as accessible as possible, so that you can always be watching the fills, always be watching the machine, making sure nothing's going wrong. Once something goes wrong, it goes real wrong. So you want to make sure that everything's going to go smoothly. And then once so we actually set up a little checklist usually in our head and make sure we just go one, right down the list, make sure you have it all. Okay, so now we've got our canning machine all sanitized. One thing I wanted to touch on is be sure to use cleaning products and sanitation products that are compatible with your canner. Our canner has a lot of aluminum on it, which reacts very poorly to peracetic acid, which is a very widely used brewery sanitizer. So we use a Star San, or it's just a little bit weaker of a sanitizer, and it doesn't affect the metals inside the canner. So now we've got it all sanitized out. We need to flush that sanitizer out of the machine. So we've got our line hooked up to our bright tank, and I can go ahead and open the fills back up again, and I'm just going to let all that sanitizer flush out of the line until I get beer rolling out. All right, looks like I'm getting good beer now. Close those back up. So now if I were just to start the can run right now, I've got 50 feet of hose from my bright tank to the canner. That's all at room temperature. And as soon as that beer hits it, it starts warming up and foaming up. You can see all the foam here. If we were to try to start the run right now, we would have to keep running cans of all foam until we got the whole line cooled down to 35 degrees, which is our canning temperature, and then we'd have a huge amount of waste. So what we do to combat that is we have kegs set up right before the canner here, and we run that beer into kegs. It foams up a little bit in the kegs, but it calms down, and you can still get a good fill on the keg without wasting as much beer. So we'll show you that next. So now we're going to look at filling some kegs to ensure that our line to our canner is nice and cold. They're still full of sanitizers. The first thing we're going to do is flush them out real quick. Start filling some of these up. Hit them with a little isopropyl to make sure they stay sanitized when you hook the filler on there. So as you can see, I've got about 2.5 barrels of beer here that's going to get filled. That's going to draw enough beer through that line. This whole hose from the bright tank to here is going to be the same temperature as the beer inside the bright tank, which is about 35 to 36 degrees. Once we get some of these full, we can start firing cans off, and then we'll only have to have foamy beer from the kegging tee right here to the canning machine, so it reduces our loss immensely at the start. All right, so now we're getting ready to start the machine. We track our loss with a flow meter, so you want to make sure your flow meter is set to 0, so you get the appropriate count of how many gallons you've used, and then you can count how many cans you've filled, and you get your loss based on that. And I can go over that a little bit later. But we've got our lines good and cold. We're going to set a delay on our fill heads so that we have time to make adjustments to the fills between cycles. And then we're going to look at getting the proper amount of foam on the beers, making sure they're not underfilled or overfilled, and just go from there. So Steve, why don't you go ahead and start her up? He's going to hold the cans back at the start. The first couple fills are just going to be solid foam as we cool the last 5 feet of the line here into the machine. You can see on your I've got a temperature gauge and a pressure gauge that I'm going to monitor. The temperature gauge here is reading 58.5 degrees. 59.5 degrees. That is not going to go into a can very nicely. We've got a good pressure though, 16.5. That's a good pressure to have. That number right there is basically the additive of the head pressure on the bright tank and the weight of beer pushing down out of the bright tank. So as the can run goes, this will go down. So you might have to adjust your head pressure on your bright tank or open the flows of your can fillers. Fire it up, Steve. You can see with every fill, this temperature is dropping down. Okay, as you can see, the 3 fill heads here are pretty clear. We're getting good beer going through them, but this one has a bunch of junk rolling through it. That is breakout from the cooling right here. You want to look anywhere on your line that has a vertical cavity for foam to sit. And as beer rushes past that, it will cause more foam to occur right there. I happen to know there's 2 spots right here I can vent. Make sure that's clear beer running through. Also going to vent our temperature gauge. That's good beer running through. So we're still getting a little bit, but a couple more fills, it should cool off. So now I see that they're overfilling, but we're getting good beer on the end. Towards the end of the last run, we probably had these opened a little farther because they were losing pressure. So I'm going to go ahead and tighten them down now. Slow that flow into the cans. And we can start looking what we're actually getting for a fill. Yeah, go and start letting them go, Steve. You didn't get a lid on that one. So right there is see, I'm underfilled now. I'm gonna go ahead and open those back up. Okay, that's good. I want it a little foamy. Still a little bit. So I'm looking right now. Number 1 and 4 are a little bit over. 2 and 3 are a little bit under. So you want to monitor each individual line and make adjustments as needed. Meanwhile, I have Kyle here. He's weighing each can that comes off the line. We look for we have a tolerance of 350 to 375 grams. Anything over 375 tends to just be a little bit too full. It doesn't have enough head pressure inside the can to ensure that it can warm up and be all right. And anything under that is just an underfill can. Anything under 350, it's just not enough beer in a can. You don't have any pulses on or anything, do you? We're getting there. That look good. Go and let him go. Because he's double filling. All right, so if you want to look now, they're all necessarily not completely equal, but they are all filling to the correct height with foam on top. And then as they get the lid, you see the foam peeking out of the top. That's very important. If you don't have that, then that means there's air in the top of your can, and that air will then dissolve into your beer and just start just destroying it. So we want to ensure that that foam is always peeking out of the top of every can. We keep the beer for canning about 36 degrees. Our bright tank can go down to 32. But when you get the beer that cold, it has a hard time foaming up on you unless you really, really agitate it somehow. So we keep it about 36 just to bring that foam out for us. How are we looking, Kyle? 360s? We got one that's a little low. So now Steve we've got the fills good. He can reduce the delay to how fast the canner can run. We were running about a 5-second here to get set up, and we'll run about a half a second delay, which will put us up to where our canning maximum is, about 40 to 41 cans a minute. So now that he's reduced the delay, all right. So now, pretty much, we've got the machine running. The fills are correct. We just want to monitor the fills as they go. Now that we've reduced the start time, the pressure is going to drop a little bit. The cans are going to run faster. The faster you can run it, the more smoothly it will run. Just as the more beer is drawn, the temperature will stay the same, the pressure will stay the same, and the canner will just get into a good rhythm. Now you want to monitor your lids and your cans and make sure that you keep feeding it everything it needs. Kyle's collecting the 6-packs over here. He's got boxes folded, ready to go. He's got extra boxes ready to go. All those things that you got ready at the beginning, you've got right here to ensure no one has to really leave their station for any amount of time, and you can just keep cranking them out. And that's where your efficiency is going to be in canning beer. Have good can fills here. The lids are getting applied. We're getting foam peeking out the top of every can. Then it's coming into our seamer. The seamer is probably the most important part of the can other than it being full of beer, because once you get it in there, if you don't get a good seam on it, you basically just poured it out. As we run, we will take samples of 4 cans at a time. We'll look at, we'll take 1, 2, 3, 4 for each fill head, and we'll mark them. We give a couple samples to our lab, and they'll rip the cans apart, test the seams to make sure they're still within variance, that our seam rollers haven't gotten messed up at all. And then they'll test it for dissolved oxygen and IBUs, color, all that as the shelf life of the beer progresses. The way the seamer works, it's got a little hockey puck that lifts the can into a chuck, and then the 2 rollers come in. The first roller does about 70% of the seam. Like if the second roller wasn't there, the seam would probably still be all right, but it just kind of protrudes a little bit. The second roller is more to clean the seam up after it's been seamed. So the way that these cans work is there's not actually any glue or anything. The top of the can just has a little bit of a rollover here, and then the end has a rollover as well that fits onto there, and there's a tiny bit of silicone gasket type material in there. It just sits on and crimps on. There's no heat or sewing or anything like that. It just stamps it together, and that's what holds the can together. After they go through the seamer, they're going off to our handle applicator. Not necessarily a necessary device. It just helps us run a little quicker. Instead of having to put the 6-pack handles on by hand, we have a machine do it for them so that the packer over there can fold the boxes, stack the 24-packs. When his stack gets full, he can pull it away with the forklift. He doesn't necessarily have to be waiting for every can to come off the line. Also, these canning lines are made to be modular. At any time, you can add on another line, which would double the amount going through the 6-pack packer that it can keep up with, but maybe one guy could not. Okay, so we've got the canner running good now. We're basically just going to let it go and keep feeding it the things it needs until the bright tank is empty. When we start getting low over in our bright tank, we're going to look at how many cans we want to end with and how many kegs we want to end with. If we're not going to be able to complete an entire pallet of empty cans, we like to end on an even layer so that you don't have a bunch of random cans sitting on top of a pallet. If we're going to change flavors tomorrow, we want to be able to get that pallet out of there, ratchet strap the top down, and not have a bunch of loose cans that we have to deal with. So once you get down to 2-3 barrels left in there, look at where you're at on your pallet, decide, hey, this is the last layer. We'll just put the rest in a couple kegs and sell them in the tasting room. When you're done with the run, we're going to hook the line up to our work ramp just like we did to sanitize, only now we're going to use cleaner and rinse to clean the whole thing out. We use PBW, Professional Brewer's Wash. Again, the canner cannot take commercial brewery cleaners. If we put caustic in it, it will mess it up. It will eat away at the parts of it. And you don't want to put any water through it more than about 150 degrees. So we make up a solution of cleaner about 130, 140 degrees and do the same thing with rinse. We're going to hook it up to the work ramp, pump that through the lines, out the fillers. It's going to go all over the canning machine. While that's happening, you want to rinse everything down. As you can see, the seamer sprays beer here. There's going to be beer and stickiness all over all these orifices. You just want to spray, surfaces, my bad. You want to spray all this down. You want to get spray inside the conveyor belt here, make sure everything's cleaned out. And then when you get done, you want to just give it a couple looks, give it a once over, make sure there's no beer resting anywhere that's going to dry up, get sticky, attract flies, create mold, any of that. And then the cleaner you keep it, just like anything else in the brewery, the better it's going to work for you. After you get done cleaning it, we like to just get a real good look at all the cables and connections. Just look for general wear and tear so that you can see like, hey, this piece is kind of, cracked over here. Maybe we need to go ahead and order another one. You don't want to be halfway through a 10-hour can run and have to shut down for the day and not fill your orders that are going out that week because you don't have a $2 piece in-house. All right, so we've gone over the different practices in canning. We went over sanitation, how to start the machine, how to run the machine, and briefly how to break the machine down. This should get you a pretty good idea of what you're trying to do when you're canning, but obviously a little bit of experience is going to go a long way with that. When we got our canning machine, we had a couple of guys from Wild Goose come and can with us for 2 straight days, and then we ran it from there on out. So it's a pretty simple process. You just need a little bit of hands-on and a little bit of explanation, and you go from there. And a lot of it trial and error from there, and you should be pretty good to push out a good amount of cans. Our machine does about 40 cans a minute, which works out to be about 100 cases an hour. So if we were to run it 24 hours a day, you're looking at 2,400 cases, which is somewhere in the neighborhood of 200 barrels of beer to 240 barrels of beer, depending on your loss. We get about a 2 to 3% loss most days, so that's pretty good compared to some other canners and some other bottling practices, things like that. Obviously, keg beer is the least loss you're going to get off of any packaging.